to make children bilingual, okay? That is the case. I'm not talking about teachers who are themselves bilingual, right? That is the case. So this is the context of research, and I'm going to talk about a context that is specific, which is developing into a bilingual one. They're trying to become a bilingual school by producing, a kind of syllabus, bilingual syllabus, and also they try to foster bilingualism in children, in kindergarten, in primary school and secondary school as well. And this is where my research is located actually, and what made me research the topic and investigate these teachers, because that was something new for the teachers who were neither trained to teach in a bilingual program nor accustomed to do that actually. That was where I thought identity change or shift could start, because for them to grow into that role, I think they first of all need to change their identity. They need to understand what they are going to do, how they're going to do it, how they're going to set up interaction with children in the classroom. Okay. So another base that I was thinking of was the shift that needs to happen when teachers go away from a deficit model of a non-native teacher to interculturally competent user of languages, multiple languages, or to an expert in, I said, allowing translanguaging in the classroom. So that is going to be kind of a shift that I was expecting to happen in teachers, in these three teachers, which whom I have observed over the year, because of 1 year observation and close collaboration with these three teachers. And actually, the shift was also engendered by Pavlenko's quotation about, that these teachers need to develop an understanding of what is a safe and secure environment or space to produce multi-competent learners, bilingual learners. So they need to develop bilingual learners, they need to help bilingual learners, but how are they going to themselves develop into that role? That was another. So they also need some secure spaces, which was allowed, throughout the year by the training, by the, feedback sessions they got. And this is from the actual classroom, actually. Some of the activities that they did with children, and which is also a good example of secure space for children. It's not a distance between teacher and learners, but they are all together physically, as you can see. And this is another scene from another classroom, and these teachers actually, as Pavlenko says, they should also regard themselves as competent, multi-competent, possessors of multiple abilities actually. This is also showing that these teachers are not going to be English teachers as a foreign language, but they're going to grow into different roles which support bilingualism in the classroom. But let me tell you one thing about that. I'm talking about these three teachers, but they are co-teaching in the classroom. But I didn't include the other three teachers, Turkish homeroom teachers. I just focused on these three English language teachers to start with. And another issue that we need to keep in mind about bilingual identity was paying attention to these dissonances or these conflicts and stress that these three teachers had when they started to work in the bilingual environment. And I think identity can only be shifted or developed when there is such stress, conflicts in terms of how they feel about their own profession, about themselves as a person in the classroom as an EFL teacher. But they need to do that in another context with other purposes in mind, with other policies. And I have observed that they had some kind of identity stress. Am I bilingual? No, I'm not. I'm an EFL teacher. And they asked that question to themselves, and this was actually a kind of beginning for their identity to be changed, to be activated maybe, or maybe it needs to be awakened, I call it, okay? And they had some conflicts about what to do in the classroom, and some kind of incompatibility with EFL teaching techniques. And on the other side, no specific technique for bilingualism, but it is how they interact with children in the classroom. They have to have some materials, but it is not there, it is what they create. So that was something not secure for them, and it was incompatible with what they were already trained for. And the last one was, they were talking about classroom management. It's a coercive version, but now they need to collaborate, as I showed in the pictures. In these two pictures, you can see close that this is a kind of collaboration, joint thinking, talking, intimacy with children, talking more closely, doing things together, sharing stories, actually, in this sense. So, okay, if we have these teachers who are not trained or accustomed to teaching in the classroom in terms of bilingualism, then in the literature I found these references. They say there is need for bilingual education. You cannot put teachers in the classroom and say, okay, you're going to teach together, make students bilingual. They need to learn that, they need support in that sense, okay? And Moore, for example, says, language learning should be reconceptualized as a bilingual learning, as a bilingual education. And also the other one says, teachers lack expertise in bilingual teaching. That is also said, and also in curriculum design. And in that school, we worked on this curriculum design a lot. We were developing some syllabuses for 40 minutes, and then for weeks, for months, for years. So teachers are the producers of these syllabuses. It's not top down, given them by me or by others. It was just like homemade, let's say. Okay, teacher created. As Paula in the morning saying, they were actually empowering themselves, by themselves actually. I was just telling something, and then I was leaving all to them. They were doing all these things. And also another, they have no specific training. Because in pre-service language teaching programs, there is no such a lesson like bilingual teaching or bilingual education. In some programs, there are in MA and PhD programs, there are some bilingual based courses, but I think we need teachers, when they are trying to become a teacher in the pre-service level, to have such courses in different ways. And the last one again, Benson also highlights the need for training to become effective bilingual teachers. So there is need for training, there is need for some courses in this sense. So we shouldn't disregard these implications. So in the title you have seen that I'm talking about bilingual teachers, but I'm also talking about dialogical approach to understand identity, to understand the identity shift in teachers. And if teacher identity is something like socially constructed, and the classroom was a social environment for teachers and for learners, so it is the best place for these three teachers to construct their identities, not alone, but with their learners. And the pictures are also symbolizing this. They were all together and trying to, understand each other, developing, more information about who they are. And another aspect of that identity is translanguaging. It's like bilingual classrooms is characterized by the translanguaging aspects and practices in general. And Garcia and Weiss says that dialogical approach is an appropriate way of understanding these identity shifts, because there is language in play. They play with language for creativity and criticality in this sense. Because when we say translanguaging, the students are expected to use full repertoire of both linguistic resources, and then they can mix them to create some kind of meaning, to make meaning, rather than using English only or Turkish only. So the secure environment is also about secure linguistic use. Students are allowed to use two languages whenever, however they want, rather than they are forbidden to use the language, that they are weak, that they are strong actually. So that is another aspect of, or another reason for using dialogical approach. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So the research design was about driven by a longitudinal qualitative research, because the data came from one whole year in different times of the year. It was not about memory, but about the actual experiences, note-taking by teachers themselves, and my own note-taking as well. And I wanted to capture the details actually about the story of the journey that they were taking while they are trying to learn how to teach, in this case, in this preschool. And then it was like, this is actually what they also say, it was a journey for me at the end of the year. I mean, I learned how, I was challenged by the idea that I can become a bilingual teacher. I mean, this was the hardest part, because they couldn't call themselves a bilingual. And it was like a kind of close collaboration and helping them understand this. Okay, you're also bilingual, you're helping the children to become a bilingual, you're using two languages. But the thing is, the teachers were not allowed to speak Turkish. The students can. I mean, that is the difference. So teachers try to interact in the target language. Learners are free to do anything they want, okay? Because the purpose is that the students need to understand what is being said by the teacher. And in the design, we can also, I mean, to show that the evidence that I have collected over time is really kind of a robust data, because there was prolonged engagement. I was, visiting the school often, weekly or sometimes bi-weekly, and we collected extensive and rich data from multiple channels, written. I mean, sometimes I took some videos and recordings of students. I brought all of them together, but I didn't include all the data here. And the important part, another important part, was the feedback session we did. I paid utmost attention to feedback. Maybe I was observing 15 minutes, but I was trying to have 1 hour feedback where I told the students, the teachers can understand actually what I'm saying. And I wanted to listen to them, because if they talk about their experiences, this is going to make them more critical. I mean, Gary is here. If people create their own stories and construct their own knowledge about what they are doing in the classroom in terms of experiences, that is going to give me more extensive data actually. So I allowed them to talk, and I invited them to several conferences where they can talk and share understandings actually. And many of them are now going to conferences actually. These 3 girls are trying to connect to the wider environment to understand more about becoming a bilingual teacher. So I talked about the context, but maybe more specific aspects is like, it's a preschool in Izmir. The students are 5, 6 years old. The school adopted a bilingual education policy, and the teachers were English, Turkish. They were working simultaneously with a monolingual teacher in the classroom. They had different responsibilities. Like, one is minor role, another is major role. It changes in the classroom in 40 minutes with a systematic and carefully designed order, with specific roles in the classroom actually. So these are the participants. Like, they are new to bilingual teaching. As I said, it was something totally new. They weren't aware of that. Probably they had heard about it. They have extensive actually teaching experience from 5 to 12 years, early to mid-career teachers, but they were characterized by their motivation, flexibility, and openness to new ways of working. I mean, they wanted to do that. That's why they are in this study now, because they will give me more understanding and in-depth insights into the process of learning to become a bilingual teacher. So these are the data that I was able to collect, observation notes, written interviews, and their own logs. As I said, they collected their own data by reconstructing the dialogues in the classroom, by discussing, by writing, by recording and then transcribing. That was something also an empowering aspect of the program, if you can call it like that. And while analyzing the data, I paid attention to the time that I devoted to data collection, and I found thick description of the context and other relevant information about the context. And then I documented all the processes, and I coded it simultaneously sometimes while I was collecting data. I was taking a lot of notes. Okay, that theme is emerging, that they are repeatedly talking about this. In the initial time, initial months, in the later months, it changed. And then I, to create an objective stance, I collaborated with a friend of mine with whom I was working on this paper as well. And then I constantly consulted these teachers about what they told me and how I interpreted that. So they gave some kind of confirmation about what I was telling about them in the reconstruction of the stories about themselves. I mean, they were constructing their own stories, but I was also reconstructing it to interpret in a proper way. So this is the intent analysis that I did. It is not a grounded theory. I used the framework by this biological approach because my purpose was trying to understand if they are developing into this role. So I tried to, find if these three teams already constructed in the biological approach is also valid, is also there for this study, individual and social. So this is not about compartmentalizing the identity process, but it is about showing these dichotomies, not for saying that they were individual or social, but to show a holistic approach with particularities in the process. I mean, it's just for understanding what is happening. But I think identity is not to be compartmentalized, because we need individual and social aspects, we need continuous and discontinuous practices, we need a kind of unity and multiple roles, unique roles in the classroom, but also other roles needed. So how are they going to come from unity to multiplicity? How did they come from continuity to discontinuity? And how did they come from like individual language teacher to a social worker in the classroom, like a homeroom teacher? To be honest, one of them said, I feel like a homeroom teacher, I'm no more an English teacher, I'm just doing it in English, but I'm doing what a homeroom teacher will do. That was what we were expecting, actually. So, as I was saying, identity is not a single entity, so it has some multiple sub-aspects. And social and individual things influence one another, and identities shift in a process of continuity and discontinuity, and multiple identities form a unity and function through dialogue. That's why we call it like dialogical approach here, which is best for describing the process of becoming a bilingual teacher. And the specific questions we can see here about social and individual construction, how teaching and learning becomes one joint process. Okay, it's not about teaching, it's not about learning, it's about both. So bilingualism made it possible. Secondly, how far all the new practices like EFL-oriented practices and bilingual pedagogy-oriented practices are integrated and still remain in competition in the mind. I mean, because they weren't actually doing only new practices. I mean, I could monitor that they were also using, some questions like concept check questions, but they were using that as an opportunity to delve into the process, to ask students to think more, to tell more actually. I'm going to show an example from the classroom. And also the last one is like how far, I mean, roles and experiences are monolithic and multiple. I mean, they were trying to be trying to develop multiple roles at the same time, like homeroom teacher, a normal teacher, EFL teacher, a bilingual teacher, and some other roles that they have created for bilingualism, supporting for bilingualism, right? So I analyzed, as I said, through content analysis, so these three things were matched with what they have said, what I have noted, and how they responded to my questions in the written interview. And you might see that since the beginning of the bilingual program, both the students and teachers have been improving themselves in many ways. This is a living and improving process for us. I mean, this is showing the social aspect of developing bilingual identity, actually. And in the second one, you can see that there is individuality and sociality here. Like, I haven't taught this age before. This is like individual aspect. And then they say, now we're planning this schedule in a detailed way. This shift has been improving so this is the link between from individual to social, perspective to learning to become a bilingual teacher. So another example from teacher's log is showing the aspect from learner's side. For example, teacher were asking, I don't know if I remember that dialogue happened when I was there, but this is what they wrote in the log. Would you like to talk about it? The teacher was asking, and student one was saying yes and raising finger, and the other says, ben parmak kaldırmıyorum. Sorry, there is no need for me to raise my finger because I did it, and using did this as a translanguage, word, inflected word for telling it. So this was a good example of the students are becoming a social entities in the classroom, and they were participating each other, and this happened without any prompt from the teacher. The teacher wasn't, prompting that particular student, okay, you, but the students were participating without any prompt. And I was showing that it was not a normal classroom, it was a social environment where people can participate in the dialogues that was happening in the classroom. And this is also showing how teachers discontinued to do some practices that they were really trying to change. And at first I was trying to make the students speak, but I was asking them a lot of questions to get the right answer. I monitored that as well, and this was something we wanted to change, but now I just give them the instructions and wait for them to act. I'm not expecting them to talk. I do not force them to speak, because imagine 5, 6 years old, English is really a new experience for learners as well, but we are asking them to talk, and then we are defying their process of thinking in that way. But the teachers came to that realization that they shouldn't force students to speak if they cannot feel so. When they need to, they speak and respond to me naturally. Then that is something, and this is showing how they discontinued an understanding that was deeply settled in their mind, because it is really like that in many schools still. And another discontinuous element, that time is not a concern anymore. I can design flexible activities that include fine motor skills, teamwork, communication, creativity. These words are really important for bilingualism, and I was actually amazed by when I heard these terms that they were using. So this is another aspect of this continuous element. And the other element that they stopped doing, or they learn to think in a particular way, creating a safe zone, safe space, and they were saying creating a safe zone where the little children can speak their minds when they are not sure is something I've always thought of. And working in a bilingual program has given me that opportunity. I mean, it is actually not only that they learned outside the program, but the experience in the school or in the classroom also made them some kind of aware of the role of safe environment where teachers, where students together can interact. That's another element that they, on one side they stop doing something, on other they continue to do some old practices in new ways. Okay, that was the case actually. And from unity and multiplicity, I mean, you will see that, I mean, when I ask the teachers about their identity, about who they are, and they usually say, I'm a teacher. But throughout the program, they have been talking about different multiple roles. I mean, they were saying, I'm a learner, by saying that I try to read and learn about bilingual education more. I mean, this is putting them into the role of learner. And on the other hand, they were calling them like novice teachers, because they said, I haven't taught this age before, I'm trying to find ways to draw attention. This is kind of, actually they are experienced teachers, early to mid-career teachers, but they see themselves as a novice teacher. This is, it's like re-beginning, for learning. And the last one is about trainee. They called themselves, like they saw themselves as a trainee. This is also adding to the multiplicity of identity. After the training and supervisions by the person, my mindset about comprehension has changed. I now know the importance of actions which are triggered by the instructions. I mean, I can clarify this. If you, the teacher's actions in the classroom were like, okay, they weren't waiting for students to understand. They were just saying and doing themselves. They were doing everything in the classroom like homeroom teacher. But I was trying to highlight that in linguistic, this interaction with students is critical. You need to let them think, let them understand, let them process what you say, and then react to that. If you don't allow that, how are they going to develop a mental exercise to understand what you're saying? And that changed. So that is why, I mean, that teacher talked about the role of comprehension. And okay, and another role shift to multiple role shift. Now I feel like they're homeroom teacher. As I'm spending time with particular kids all day, compared to my previous experiences, I feel more comfortable in my classroom. You see, I mean, the classroom is no more driven by the standards, by the, you know, already set rules. It is teachers and students are taking the role of creating, you know, an environment where they can happily interact and learn in 2 languages though. And they also self-assigned some new roles. They told me we need to be patient there. We need to be patient teachers rather than teachers in a hurry. And we should ensure a safe and fair classroom environment. That's another aspect of the new role. And I call them as like self-assigned roles because they're saying we, as a group of community, a community of practitioners and learners in the classroom or in the school, let's say, and they're self-suggesting actually here, like we need to be that, we need to be patient, we need to be, you know, create a safe and, you know, happy environment. And the last one, we should be planning the schedule together in a detailed way. So this is also adding to another aspect, you know, the schedule need to be created by the teachers because they are the producer of the syllabus. That's why I said empowerment in that sense. And another example, teacher-learner roles reversed. I think I found in the last aspect of identity, I found more examples like multiplicity was, yeah, okay. So I need to continue a little bit further. Oh, half an hour. Right. Good. Okay. So, but actually, this is another aspect of students asking teachers questions using translanguaging. This is my favorite door. Is mine. I mean, this is my favorite door. And then the student says, "Is your door like that?" The student is asking to the teacher, and the teacher, "No, it is not. My door is white." I mean, it's a normal. I mean, he wants to learn. He is curious to learn more about what color the door is. Well, what is more important is that this sentence is created by the learner automatically without being prompted, you know, in any ways. So there is also another multiple role, maybe, yeah. So we have seen that, I mean, the shift in the identity happened because of the bilingual experience, and there was frequent comparison of past and present practices throughout learning, and the shift was ongoing, continuous and multiple in different ways. And then, you know, formal practices do exist, but they are implying dialogue between old and new identities, and they were really not statically developing, but actively progressing in different ways. And this is supported by the idea here, biological self is a complex dynamic system. So this complexity and dynamism was going on as long as they were experiencing this bilingual teaching. Okay, so this is maybe some, so they switched from a content language teacher role to homeroom teacher, developed a sense of welfare, security and learning, and they became more self-agency through self-reflection because they reflected a lot on the process of their own learning, the students' reactions, what was happening in the classroom, and they happened to allow students to use full linguistic repertoire. This is another new learning for teachers. I remember they weren't allowing students to use Turkish in the classroom. They were just forcing them to speak English, say in English, "I don't speak Turkish, I don't understand you." I said, "Look, don't do that, because they know that you understand Turkish. Why are you telling a lie?" So you can say that you are a bilingual teacher. You can say, "I can speak 2 languages, but my role is this. But you can use 2 languages." Okay, there should be some kind of honesty in the classroom. Like, it was actually, they were faking. Okay, some teachers are given native names actually, so they don't speak any Turkish anywhere. I speak Turkish. They hear me. I say, you speak Turkish. I say, I can speak both. Can you speak both? They say, oh yeah, sometimes. Okay, that's good. You need to give them this clear understanding actually. So there is kind of obsession with L2 only strategy in the classrooms, but with kids it doesn't work. And okay, and that's kind of, maybe I need to talk about the dormancy effect. I mean, I think they need to put the old identity not in the, not as frozen, but it's like a dormancy where which needs to be awakened sometimes when they need to, because there's no guarantee that they're going to teach in a bilingual school. They can change their school, so they will, you know, switch to EFL context. So they need to learn and keep it as well. I mean, it's not freezing, but actually putting in a dormancy state, you can say. So this is the last slide. So bilingual education has the potential to create a secure environment, as I have observed in that classroom, and it enhanced dialogue, and it allowed access to the self. I mean, the students, the teachers learned about themselves, reflected upon their own understandings, and it also revealed individual learning in social situations. I can learn myself as a person in this individually in the social environment. I can get it. So I can be part of the social environment, but I can learn individually, because these three teachers learned different things, did not learn the same thing. So individual learning within social environment is really was important aspect. Thank you. Less intervention in the classroom. The students were free. That was very important. The teachers were free too, actually. I wasn't prescribing anything. I was saying, bring me, I'll give you some feedback, and if you like my feedback, you can do it. If you don't, you can do it your own way, and then you can reflect on that process and then see if it works. That was the key point, actually. So I wasn't like, okay, this is what you are going to do. For bilingualism is kind of, I like the word like, empowerment comes through liberation. I mean, teachers, if they are not liberated, how are they going to be empowered? They empower themselves. I can't empower anyone, you know. And then the last one is like, it also allowed students to interact without any prompts from the teacher. They were, I remember, I mean, they were also translating if their friends weren't, weren't able to understand what teacher was saying. For example, one time the teacher was saying, okay, you're going to cut these and then pass it. The student didn't understand, and then the other said, katças, which means we will cut it, Okay, in Turkish, like cut were English, but just is a marker for future reference in Turkish, a grammatical marker. So it was actually a nice experience for me as a consultant there, and I have seen that the teachers now call themselves like, yeah, I've learned to become a bilingual, but there is still much to learn, I guess, and that's what I'm telling. I say, no limit to learning. So thank you very much. I think